Well, good afternoon, and let me just say what a great honor this is, and particularly to deal with people, to be asked to address people who are experts in a field of which I know nothing, which is higher education. I've been in that, I've been employed by it all my life, but actually remarkably insulated from the realities of making it work, which is a tribute to how well it's been done at every institution I'm at. If you notice the administration, you're in trouble. Okay. So I'm going to talk fairly briefly here about opening, and then we can take it further with Cappy and I as we talk about it, about the role of higher education in this extraordinary pulling apart that's taken place in our society. So we've had an enormous expansion of inequality. I think in many ways our perception of the society we live in has not at all caught up with the reality, which is fully a return to Gilded Age levels in the United States. Actually, Thomas Piketty's nice point was that actually the Gilded Age was a lot of self-made men, and what we're having increasingly looks instead more like his own country's Belle Epoque, which was largely a society dominated by inherited wealth, and that's a very important thing to note. Three propositions. Let me give you three propositions that are often adduced about the role of higher education in all of this. And the thing is, they are not, you don't have to believe in all of them. In fact, you shouldn't believe in two of them. But the third one is, you hear them all the time, and it's really crucial to understand that, on the other hand, the third one is very, very much true. The first proposition is that education skills are at the core of what's been happening, are the story about why inequality is widening so much. That it's the reason that we're having trouble creating jobs is because workers don't have the right skills. That the reason we're seeing widening inequality is that only some workers have the skills to participate in this modern high technology economy. The second proposition is that highly educated Americans, highly educated workers are big winners in this story. And the third proposition is that access to higher education, affordable higher education, education that is where the rungs on the ladder are available, particularly for those who start out from lower socioeconomic status, is crucial to having a society, more crucial than ever. So that last proposition is true. The first two are things that people think but are probably not true. So the first part, just to say, the idea that what we have right now is a skills gap, and that's what's holding the economy back. It's one of those things that people, it's the kind of thing that Jamie Dimon writes an op-ed or has an op-ed piece written with his name on it, to show what a smart guy he is. But in fact, there's not a smidge of evidence for it. Unemployment rates among the college-educated are lower than they are in the population at large, but that's always true. They're far higher than they were before the financial crisis. This has been really an equal opportunity recession. It has afflicted almost everybody. If you're looking for groups that have done well in the economic crisis, particular skill categories, they're very hard to find. Almost nobody's wages have been going up significantly. The exceptions are funny. I mean, not funny, they're important for the people who get them, but they tend to be, if anything, manual skills that happen to be in short supply because we've lost them. Welders are doing quite well right now. There's been a surge in wages for people who know how to operate sewing machines because there's been some reshoring of the apparel industry. But there really is, there was a widespread hypothesis, just taking a longer term view, the hypothesis of skill bias technological change. It's so common in these discussions that people just say SBTC, and you're supposed to know what that is. View was that what we had was technology was biasing the economy towards needing ever more in the way of highly skilled and particularly high formal education workers, and that was the explanation of rising inequality in the United States. 15 years ago, it was very widely accepted among labor economists. At this point, it's largely fallen apart. The evidence just doesn't seem to support that story. And it doesn't support it in a couple of ways. One is that a large part of the increase in inequality is actually an increase in inequality among the highly educated. As I like to say, hedge fund managers and high school teachers have similar levels of education. It's also that if you look at the details, it just doesn't seem to work. And also that while the education premium, the excess in wages of college graduates over non-graduates, while it did widen a lot between about 1980 and 2000, hasn't widened much since then. Really, the story that identifies, while inequality has, of course, continued to rise, the story that identifies inequality with a premium to education is 15 years out of date. It has not really been sustainable as a story of what's happening now. As for the highly educated being big winners, well, it's certainly better to have that good education, better to, and the advantage of the highly educated over those without is a lot bigger than it was in 1980, although not a lot bigger than it was in 2000. But so in that sense, it is very important to have that education. But these past 15 years, it turns out that even college-educated workers have seen a decline. The median college-educated worker has seen a decline in wages since 2000, adjusted for inflation, of course. The entry-level wages for college graduates are down substantially since 2000. You're not doing well. Although the U.S. economy, despite the crisis, is a lot richer than it was 15 years ago, none of that has trickled down even to college graduates. Now, lower levels have done somewhat worse, but this is no longer a story of the highly educated versus everyone else. It's a story where it seems like almost everyone is failing to participate in economic growth. So you might ask the question, where's it going? The answer is partly that there's a substantial shift in the distribution of income against labor of all kinds. That after a long time when we said, well, it's about workers, it's not about capital versus labor. Since the year 2000, it's about capital versus labor. It's a big shift towards profits, away from wages, including wages of highly educated workers. The other thing is that even among the compensation, a very large share of the gains is going to a tiny group of people at the top. Typically when we do these, trying to illustrate just how concentrated income is, the school teacher comparison is a favorite. Something depending on the year, but when hedge fund managers have had a good year, the 25 top compensated managers typically earn something like 3 times the annual income of all the school teachers in New York City, something like that, or something like half of all of the teachers in America. So that's telling you something about this extreme concentration at the top. Given all of that, and you might ask, well, what's causing all of that? And the answer is, well, okay, I'd need about an hour to explain at length why we really don't quite know. We have some interesting stories. However, none of that should be taken to say that access to higher education is no longer relevant. We cannot, if we want to address this larger problem of a highly unequal and increasingly unequal society, just increasing the amount of education is not going to do it. But in this society, education is a crucial ticket. At least whether it's the solution to inequality or not, your chance of making it as far as you can depends critically on access. And that, of course, is where we have another thing to worry about, which is that access is becoming increasingly difficult. There was a piece by Tim Taylor just the other day pointing out that in the 70s, when he was in college and I was in college, it was possible to earn enough on a summer job to pay your tuition at many quite good schools. Inconceivable now. The aid has been cut, access is down. We don't have as much data as you'd like on comparative mobility, but we do have a few studies that really do say, in case you were wondering, yes, the kind of family you were born into has an enormous impact on your ability to get into and finish college. And we have some evidence that says that effect dominates inherent talent or dominates academic achievement as of high school levels. 8th graders with high test scores but from low-income families are less likely to graduate college than 8th graders with the reverse. Yes, rich dumb kids are more likely to get a degree than smart poor kids. This is part of this, in a way, brings us back to Piketty. We are increasingly becoming a society in which, as far as we can tell, we don't have hard numbers on that, but I think the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. We're becoming a society in which social mobility is declining, in which class is increasingly inherited. Education is the key part of that. It's not the only part, as capital, sheer old-fashioned inheritance of money, is playing an increasing role, but education is crucial. So we have a huge problem that hopefully we will be able to address. We'll eventually have sufficient political consensus to address. Higher education is only going to be a piece of it, but it's going to be a crucial piece. We're not going to get anywhere in the direction of the kind of society we ought to be unless we can make that higher education accessible to all, regardless of where they come from. And along with everything else, maybe we can make a step towards being who we should be. Thank you. All right.
So I'm going to invite Cappy Hill to add her perspective on the issues that Paul advanced. And then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience for these two important experts. So you might be thinking about your question, but let's turn next to you, Cappy.
Okay. Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Paul. I thought I'd start by just saying that Paul's and my paths first crossed when he was a very, very, very young professor at Yale, and I was only a slightly younger graduate student, and I took his international trade course. And I remember a good amount of the course, but what I mostly remember is a comment that he made on my final exam, my final blue book,
oh dear.
which I think I still have, in fact. Only nerdy students would still keep them, but I've got mine, and it said eschew obfuscation. So this is the first time I've been on a panel with Paul, and we'll see how I do.
Okay.
So I thought I would just quickly, in response to Paul's comments, make 4 points, and then which I'll do fairly quickly, and then we can turn to Q&A. Higher education is a good thing. It raises your income. It gives you job choice, job satisfaction, job security. But the bad thing in America these days, as Paul alluded to, is that access to getting that BA depends very importantly on your family income as well as your race. So higher education is not exactly supporting the equal opportunity and social mobility that we value in our society. And despite claiming that we're the land of equal opportunity, there is, in fact, very low intergenerational mobility right now. I agree with Paul that the increasing income inequality is incredibly important, and we don't quite understand it, although I'd like to say that I see it as fundamentally a result of government policy failure and not primarily the failure of the higher education institutions. It seems somehow to be the result of decisions about what kind of society we want, or at least what kind of society those with power want. And higher education is not going to be able to solve this problem alone. Higher education is committed to access and affordability. If you look at our mission statements, almost all of them refer to that. I want to briefly just mention a colleague of mine who passed away last year, Gordon Winston, who was really one of the fathers of the economics of higher education. And he referred to our institutions as being part church and part car dealer. And I do think that our commitment to access and affordability is the church part. And we can actually do something about this. We can do something about this by just admitting a more socioeconomically diverse and racially diverse student body. But it's not happening, and we want to think about why that's the case. Certainly one of it is just most students are being educated in the public sector, and states are cutting back appropriations to that sector. And that's leading to higher tuition that's not being matched by need-based aid. That means higher net prices, lower enrollment, lower success. So we're not doing what we can do there. The private nonprofit sector, we're a smaller share. We can't be the solution to the problem, but we can certainly do our part. And then my final point is just that rising income inequality, which again I think is primarily a government policy failure, is actually making it harder for higher education to address the access issue. And I think thereby hurting our ability to contribute to equal opportunity. It's definitely the case that access to a great education and its returns right now are more easily available to children of wealthy families. And higher education, we compete for those wealthy students. And that may be Gordon's car dealer part of our operations. But we do respond to incentives. Those kids have had a lot invested in them, all the way from prenatal care through 12th grade. They're incredibly talented, and they can pay the full freight. And the low-income kids are getting a weaker K through 12 education, and they need more financial aid. So the trade-offs involved right now between admitting a low-income student rather than a high-income one, even if equally talented or more talented, that trade-off has become more problematic as a result of rising income inequality. So I'll leave it there.
So as you say, there's a deep and abiding commitment among all the individuals in this audience about our commitment to serving individuals, to provide opportunity regardless of family status, financial status, or religion or ethnicity. And yet, it isn't happening. And what are the biggest challenges each of you see in this? And if you had a magic wand and could make one change in how our country and our society is dealing with these issues, what would that be?
So, I just wanted to quickly, just the church and car dealer made me think of this summary I've seen of my other employer, which is also an institution with a mission. But the New York Times it's a luxury platform for it's an advertising platform for luxury goods. Wrapped in some news. It happens to be the greatest news organization in the world, which is the mission, but what supports it is T Magazine. So anyway, yeah, your question actually ties in with something I've been talking about with a number of policy intellectuals of a similar political orientation, which is the question what people have been asking is, okay, what next after healthcare? Healthcare, for all of the imperfections, all of the failures, we finally did something really, really important. And I just saw that the new numbers out. We've cut the number of uninsured in a third in the last year. So that's a big deal. But what's next? And everyone seems to be gravitating towards the young as the next frontier, which is going to be on multiple levels. It would be education. It would be even things like nutrition. It would be things like school lunches, which are need. There's a lot of things you can do, but to improve nutrition, but it's going to take more money. There's a lot you can do to improve access to education. It would take more money. Not all that much money when all is said and done, but if we could have another, not much by various measures of that, but if we could find another 1 or 2% of GDP to spend on access to higher education, that would be transformative here. That could restore the kind of access that we used to have for people who happen not to have chosen the wrong parents. So that's where I'd say this is where it's going to take some commitment of resources, not a huge amount, but we have to understand how important this is to our ideals.
What do you think, Kathy?
I would say that it would be great if the government would directly affect and tackle the income inequality issue, and it can do that through minimum wage rates, it can do that through taxes on the wealthy, and it can do that, really importantly, by adopting monetary and fiscal policies to keep us out of deep and long recessions. But on top of that, I guess the second thing would be supporting what Paul says. We're actually a very rich country, and the fact that we're reducing our support of higher education just seems, and education more broadly, seems just crazy. So I would love to see us just allocate more resources to it. My only worry is that all the powers that are keeping us from addressing income inequality will be the same ones that keep us from actually tackling increasing resources to education.
Yeah. Actually, I want to mention, I do a course, actually, by the way, I'm still Princeton faculty until this summer, and then I become CUNY faculty this summer. But of course, I'm going to port over to CUNY, a course on the economics of the welfare state. And I like to do comparisons of the US and France. Not because France is better, they screw up on a lot of things. And we screw up on a lot of things, but they tend to be different things. And one interesting thing you discover, if you actually look at employment, among prime age adults, France is actually a little bit better than we are. Slightly higher fraction of people 25 to 54 are working in France than in the US. Not something people know. A lot fewer people over 55 are working in France, and that's because they screwed up, actually. They've made it too easy to retire early. A lot fewer people in France under the age of 25 are working. And you think, well, that must be because there are no jobs. And it is true that there are it's hard to get a job. But a large part of that actually turns out to be there are many fewer French college students who have to work their way through school. And that's a case of, well, which country is exactly being friendly to opportunity here? And it's not us.
So my reaction, Cappy, is you probably would need a magic wand to accomplish those changes in, in tax rates and other ways of fiscal policy. You would need a magic wand in this environment to pull that off, and that would be an interesting topic to talk about how that might change. But you changed at Vassar. You made a quite specific decision to make Vassar more accessible and more affordable for the full range of potential students and helped them gain a great education. So talk to us about, because we all share these same values, but it's the strategy sometimes that trips us up.
Actually, the strategy is pretty easy. You allocate more of your resources to need-based financial aid. That's all it is. The students are out there. There are talented low-income kids who can come to our schools and succeed, which is not to say that we shouldn't be investing more in preschool and K through 12, because clearly it's not a level playing field. But you have to make the decision to reallocate those resources. But it's not an easy one, because every single dollar that you forego by giving need-based financial aid, you don't have to spend on something else. And those other things are good things. It's small classes, great faculty, laboratories. And again, going back to my argument about income inequality, we are competing for those wealthy kids, and their families and they have gotten pretty used to nice rooms, good food, organic lawn care, all kinds of things that contribute to pushing up our costs. So you can do it, and it would be easier for us to continue to do it if all of you would do it too.
Do you want to offer some comments on that?
Really? No, because the way I started, I have not, blissfully never dealt with these things, but I approve.
Well, there, we're done.
There we are.
So let me shift the topic a little bit. And there are some people, in fact, more than some, a lot, who are expressing a perspective that entrepreneurship is flourishing in our country today. But our businesses are sclerotic. They are not reflecting the benefits that we see in the entrepreneurial communities. Is that a fair assessment?
There's a question even about how much entrepreneurship there is. I mean, one of those funny things, if you look at international comparisons, is that the U.S. is actually low on the number of small businesses compared with a number of other advanced countries. And you can actually think about it. If you think about it, you can think about why. Until just now, health insurance was also often unavailable for someone who was trying to start a business or for that person's employees. The safety net is very threadbare in this country, so people are afraid to take risks. So we're not actually as entrepreneurial as people imagine. And in any case, at any given time, most people are going to be working for well-established businesses. We may celebrate the entrepreneur, we may celebrate the guy starting a business in a garage, but if we're going to ask about how people live for the most part, it's going to be how do people live in ongoing businesses. And I think we have an excessive fixation on the heroic story. Actually, what's even interesting is we have this huge fixation on the heroic success stories. When Steve Jobs died, there was all this, what an appropriate name because of all those jobs he created, except if you took a look at it, Apple basically employs almost nobody in this country. Never did. It's a great product. It creates great products, but you certainly don't want to think of it as a source of large-scale employment growth in the United States. So I think that's a trap. You're falling into the sort of the romanticism of the heroic business leader. And there are heroic business leaders, and great stuff happens, but it's a workaday world, and the point is to take that workaday world and make it something that works for the rest of us.
Cappy, do you want to offer a perspective on that?
Well, I guess I would just maybe comment on innovation and entrepreneurial efforts in higher education, since I know actually a teeny bit more about that than in the economy more broadly. But I think one of the possible solutions to the cost problem and the access problem that we're clearly talking about a lot over the last 5 or so years is whether we can find the magic technological productivity advance which would significantly reduce our costs and allow us to offer this quality education that the public sector doesn't seem to want to support anymore. And I actually think there's amazing innovation going on in that space. But I think it's still a ways away before there's going to be a fundamental transformation in our sector.
John Hennessy talked to us last night about this very issue.
Yeah.
Were you here?
I was there, yeah.